Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maggie, and on behalf of Book Soup, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for our virtual event with Joe Harkin and Jessamine Chan discussing Tell Me an Ending. We're so excited and grateful that our bookstore can continue to bring authors and their works to our community during this time. We'll be hosting more virtual events in the near future, and you can learn more about them on our website, booksoup.com, as well as our social media at BookSoup. Support our bookstore and our authors and purchase a copy of tonight's featured book. Just click on the green purchase button that reads Tell Me an Ending directly below the viewer screen. The link will redirect you to our website where you can continue your checkout process. We're also selling digital audiobooks and ebooks through Libro FM and Kobo for those who are interested. If you'd like to ask a question during the event, please use the Ask a Question box at the bottom of the screen and type it in. Please do not use the sidebar chat to ask a question. A little more about Jo Harkin. She studied literature at university. She daydreamed her way through various jobs in her 20s before becoming a full-time writer. She lives in Berkshire, England, and Tell Me an Ending is her first novel. A little more about Jessamine Chan. Her short stories have appeared in Tin House and Epoch. A former reviews editor at Publisher Weekly, she holds an MFA from Columbia University and a BA from Brown University. Her work has received support from the Elizabeth George Foundation, the Breadloaf Writers Conference, the Wurlitzer Foundation, Gentle, the Kimmel Harding Nelson Center, the Anderson Center, the VCCA, and Ragdale. And without further ado, I'm going to turn the camera over to Jo and Jessamine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that intro. And Jo, congratulations on your launch. I'm so excited to be on tour with you. So for everyone who's watching, thank you for being here. And Jo and I met on a virtual tour for Simon & Schuster in the fall. So it's very nice when virtual events lead to real life friendships. So it's also exciting to talk to you about your book because the only problem with reading a galley months in advance is that you can't talk to anyone about it. So I found your book so impressive and moving in so many ways. And I would describe it as a speculative novel with huge philosophical questions at its core. But for any viewers who are tuning in who haven't read the book yet, what would you say the book is about?
Well, firstly, thank you so much for interviewing me. I know I've said this in the chat already, but it bears repeating. I love the School for Good Mothers. It is a speculative tour de force, and I'm just really honored that you're joining me and interviewing me. It's as well as it just being, I think this is just a fun time to hang out for us two. So yeah, what the book is about. Essentially, it's built around one question, which is how would you feel? What would you do if you received an email telling you that you'd had a memory removed, you didn't know anything about this, and now you have the opportunity to have that memory restored? So the novel follows 4 very different characters, all of whom have basically received this message and now have a dilemma they're facing. In the world of the novel, the clinic that carries out the memory deletions has basically had its own world overturned by new research that has shown that memories can be restored. It's been on the receiving end of a class action lawsuit, and it's been basically forced to tell all these people that they're able to get their memories reinstated. So the 4 characters, we've got Finn. He's an Irish architect living in Arizona, and it's actually his wife who receives the letter, and it begins to start some jealousy in him. He's wondering what she got deleted because he knows it happened when they were together and she didn't tell him. And he starts becoming suspicious about her relationship with an old friend of hers, David. And then there's May. She is a troubled university dropout who has actually been bothered by traces of what she believes is her deleted memory. So even before she gets the letter, she's already questioning what she might have had removed and is bothered by these traces of a city that she remembers but knows she's never been to. And then there is Oscar. He is a good-looking, rich, charming young man who seems to have everything going for him, but actually isn't having a very good time at all. He is traveling pretty much on the run, pursued by mysterious figures who you sort of find out more about later in the book. So yeah, he's living a life of fear and stress. And then we have forgetting my characters now, we have William. He is a former police officer who basically is suffering from PTSD, and he's actually looking to get his memory deleted. So we see the process from that end. Finally, so this is a multi-stranded novel, we have Noor. She's a psychologist at the memory removal clinic itself, and she has begun to question the ethics of what they're doing there, as well as what her glamorous boss, Louise, might be up to. She suspects her of some wrongdoing. So yes, this is a long spiel.
I was really curious because how you were going to describe it, because it's got so many pieces. When I was coming up with what questions to ask, the hard thing is asking questions that don't give any spoilers, because part of the pleasure of reading the novel is there are a number of surprises that begin pretty early on. So if the questions are a little vague, that's why. But one of the things I most admire about the book is that it's paced as a page turner, but it's really intellectually hefty. And I love the description from Scribner of the book as a blend between Never Let Me Go and Black Mirror. So I was wondering when and where and how you got the idea for the book, and whether or not there was any real life inspirations.
So yeah, this is a funny one because the origins of the book are kind of mysterious to me. Basically, I was walking home with my partner one day and said, I think I could write a speculative fiction novel, and then proceeded to just outline most of the plot, most of the characters. I knew the outline of it in about 5 minutes. So, I mean, obviously in my unconscious, things must have been happening. I think it was a combination of reading about real life science.
What?
Sorry? I know. It's not going to happen like that again. We can get onto that. Like I can't repeat this trick. So I think there have been things that have been bubbling away that not in my conscious mind. So there have been scientific studies that I'd read that fascinated me. And then I recently got into person-centered sci-fi and speculative fiction, like not the kind of side of sci-fi where it's like, you know, space exploration or things like that. It's basically real world adjacent plots where it's people whose lives are our lives with one little change. And that's what kind of really fired me up with this one. So I think all of these things were just, you know, bubbling away in my subconscious until I decided to make this bold statement that I could write a speculative fiction novel. Unfortunately, I have tried making several bold statements since, and nothing has come up. So it wasn't that process with what I'm working on now.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just had to exclaim over the idea that you.
It's really annoying. Other writers just hate me whenever I say it. I've come to dread this anecdote because I can see eyes rolling.
It probably was on your mind in some unconscious way for a long time. So do you like so I know that like book marketing and how we would describe our own books are different sometimes. Do you agree with the Never Let Me Go Black Mirror mashup, or are there other touchstones that were closer for you?
I mean, I love that one. It feels a bit cheeky because it's a huge compliment. Like both of those things were inspiring to me hugely. So to have that sort of bandied about is a pretty big deal for me, and it does make me feel a bit like a imposter syndrome-y. But then also we could say this about your book as well. I think any speculative fiction that sort of focuses on character and people and relationships, I think, Never Let Me Go meets Black Mirror is kind of like, there's a rich seam of this kind of fiction and television out there. And I think everyone's into it. So it's in that sense, it's really good for giving people an idea of the vibe, really, even if I don't pull it off quite as amazingly as these guys.
I've found it really tricky to answer questions about speculative fiction and dystopian fiction because I am not super well versed on the genre conventions. I generally did what I wanted, and I don't think it like fits neatly into the. I may be breaking convention just because I don't exactly know what they are. Are you someone who's well versed in those genres?
Not really. I started looking up. I mean, I think yours as well could be described as satire, like it's very Orwellian. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there are lots of things. I've seen my book described as dystopian in a few places now, and it's actually something I probably wouldn't agree with. Like I like a dystopia, don't get me wrong, but this is technology that's very close. it's actually in development. So it's kind of like,
oh wait, can you tell us more about that?
yeah, sure. So basically, like, I'll try to keep this as brief and non-waffly as possible. But with memory, we used to think that memory was just this fixed thing in the brain. It was like a packet of data that was laid down, and whenever you accessed it, you accessed this pure, unchanged memory. And then more recently, in fact, like late 90s, early 2000s, there was a lot of research with people like, well, led by Nader, who's famous for it, where they basically discovered something called reconsolidation, where every time you remember the memory, the act of remembering changes the memory itself. So each time the brain brings this memory back, it has to rebuild out proteins. And the conditions under which it does so can change the way the memory is laid down again. So a memory is like a photocopy of a photocopy. It changes according to the last time you accessed it. So scientists basically found that at the point where you're remembering it, the memory is, it's vulnerable. You can change it or even delete it. So this is kind of where the book jumps off from. We basically, in the real world right now, in humans, studies are focused on changing like one component of the memory. So like taking the fear component out of a PTSD memory using an anti-anxiety drug or even MDMA. And with the deletion side of things, it's only been done in rats so far and other animals, but it's only a matter of time before these things make the leap to people. So when I was researching, I kind of thought that I had like free play. This was, I could write whatever I wanted, like let my imagination run riot. And actually I was like, oh, okay, I need to familiarize myself with all these academic studies. And actually the science might catch up to me before I'm finished, and it might not even be speculative anymore. So that was that's the background of this. And so it's kind of, it's not dystopian, it's coming.
That is terrifying to think about.
But then also it's kind of, it can offer, I can talk more about this later, but it could genuinely offer some hope. So it's there are pros and cons, and troubling things, but also there's some promise there.
Yeah, that is really sobering to think about. I think one of the hardest things about writing something with a technological element is that it's also a long journey from the time your book is sold to when it's published. And so you have to account for, like, mine was a little over 2 years. So I had to just hope that we weren't going to be in that stage of tech, and that there was a futuristic component. So I know you talked about coming up with the whole thing really fast in a burst of inspiration. I don't know if you can untangle for viewers how the characters were developed, because I mean, for me, I've only ever written fiction from one character's point of view, focused on one character the whole time, because I frankly don't know how to write a book like this. And so I'm especially impressed by juggling multiple narratives and writing across race and class and age and gender. So could you talk a bit about the development of this cast of characters, and like, were any of them particularly fun or particularly difficult to write?
So I mean, a lot of them did arrive. Sorry to keep harking back to this, but
okay, you should own it.
All formed. But no, there were some changes actually. And so initially, Noor was actually an investigative journalist. So she was outside the clinic system. We didn't have anybody on the inside. And I got some really good advice early on to say it would be great to have someone within the clinic itself, so we could, get a fuller picture of that world. And that was, brilliant. And I went with that. So that was a huge rewrite for her, actually. A lot of the other characters, their personalities, I kind of had the gist of, but some of them needed changing throughout. So we had, I think William, because he suffers from PTSD, he was actually quite difficult. He was the most difficult to write, I think, aside from Noor with the wholesale retrofitting that went on with her. William, it's hard to write about someone who is in constant pain without making it just painful and, difficult and kind of ultimately desensitizing to read. Like, people were getting bored of William suffering. So it was a challenge to kind of lift his section and refocus it, give him some, more activity and stuff. So he was one that I had to get my head around. Fun to write was actually Oscar. He was really entertaining. Like originally he was a lot more promiscuous. So we had like quite a few sex scenes with Oscar. A three-way was one of them, which hasn't made the final cut. I think basically his section was too big and just quite chaotic because he actually suffers from, he can barely, I don't know if I said this earlier, but he can barely remember his early childhood. So yeah, there was just a lot going on, and yeah, some of the sex had to go. And then, yeah, so in terms of, I'm trying to think what the original, get back to the original question here. I just like headed off on my own tangents. Yeah, those were my most favorite and least favorite characters, I think.
Did you always have a sense of the possible intersections of the storylines without giving too much away?
Yeah, like I want to just plunge in and be like, yes, this and this, and then like, oh no, hang on, that is the final page of the novel. So there was some, let me think, who did I want? There's a connection that wasn't in the original plan that I added in later, which I found really satisfying to do. But yeah, there are characters. So the novel is structured. There are people who intersect and people who don't intersect with the other characters. So it is kind of somewhere between, I wouldn't say it's a collection of short stories, but it's, you know, you could almost read it that way. It's in that weird ground between the novel and the short stories. So yeah, and then there are characters who actually intersect quite closely. So that was quite enjoyable to do. But I don't think, not many of the intersections changed that much throughout. I was tempted to bundle them all in together. Like there was a point where everyone converged on one day, but that was just a logistical and plot nightmare. So I just scrapped that.
I'm just going to jump in to remind viewers, if you would like to ask Jo a question, please type it into the Ask a Question box. We'll shift to audience questions in just a little bit, but there are a few more questions that I want to raise to fit in. One thing that I really admire was that you wrote about technology that had existed for 20 years. And that allowed you to write about the controversies, the media, just the building in more of the outside world response. I wanted to ask you, what's your approach to world building? I mean, for me, I really like novels like Never Let Me Go and Severance, where you don't have everything explained. But what suits you in terms of style and technique there?
I think I'm quite thorough by nature. So I wanted to go wholeheartedly into the world building. As you say, it's, you know, the technology is established, so it's begun to shape our world. Whereas in School for Good Mothers, it's like, this is new and the shockwaves are being felt. So yeah, I really went into how every element of it would play out, to make sure everything worked. There weren't any sort of glaring implausible things. It was, I overthought it. And then because I'd done so much thinking, I wanted to just put all of that into the book. And it was Never Let Me Go and actually not Clara and the Sun at the time, but, you know, novels like this, where it's just that such a kind of beautiful light touch. Like it's as if it is a novel. It's as if we're existing in the world of the novel and we're reading this book. Like there's no need to throw in all these explanations because we know it, we live it. So it makes it feel even more real. And yeah, I love that about those books. It kind of taught me that less is more. And that's something that I'm still tempted to just throw all my workings out in there just to kind of show the reader that I've done them. But I'm learning to hold off.
No, it's really well done. One of the things that I really appreciate is that this really made me think about whether or not we need our pain to make us who we are. And I was wondering if you had any thought, like, what's the role of pain in making a meaningful life? Like, can our life still mean the same thing? Like, if the traumas are erased, like, because it's very tempting to think about letting go of those bad memories. But I think I sat and thought about, like, oh, I would delete this year and that year, but then it definitely formed who I am now. So what are your thoughts on that?
I really love this question, by the way. Yeah, so I mean, in the world of the novel, you only delete a short space of time, so it's kind of no longer than a week. So that kind of limits the kind of things you can erase. It's not like Eternal Sunshine where a whole relationship could go. But yeah, I mean, there are two types of memories that could cause you pain. I think there are the things that there are the PTSD memories. Something's happened to you that isn't a decision you've made. It's something that's been done to you. And then there are the kind of memories that it's a mistake maybe that you've made, something that you've done that you regret. So there are two very different motivations and different kinds of pain. I think with the PTSD, the idea that pain is instructive and we can learn from it and it's character building. I don't really feel that's the case with PTSD. You have a situation that could be random, it's not your fault, a car accident, an assault, like maybe something in a war zone. And you have this very intense result of that. So basically, when you're in this situation, your brain is flooded with the panic chemicals, which is what kind of sets this as the response in your mind. Like, I'm trying to think of a way to describe it without going into too much detail, but basically the memory is not processed in a normal way. Your brain effectively gets trapped in the memory. You're stuck. You're kind of going between blocking out this PTSD response and having full-blown, something will trigger it and you have a full-blown attack, which is where we find William. So I think in that situation, there's no learning, there's no growth, and usually there's no meaning to it. So the idea that you could hold on to this pain and it's better for you, I think this is where I would actually think that technology like this could be a good thing. It's not character building, it's character suppressing. It can ruin your life. You can't take joy in things. It holds you back. So if you could erase that, I don't think no one's going to regret the loss of that particular memory. I think in some situations, it's debatable whether it would be good to get rid of the whole memory or just maybe the emotional component of it, which is what's being developed at the moment with a lot of really promising studies. So in that sense, I feel kind of positive about the tech. But then, the memories, so the gray area, and a lot of readers and people who I've talked to have, one of the really common responses is, I wouldn't want to lose my mistakes because I think they've made me who I am. I've learned from them. And I completely get this. And, and this is obviously assuming that you have made a mistake once and then learned from it and grown as a person, and that you're not making the same mistake over and over again, which is kind of what a lot of people do. So for those people who manage to just have a one-off mistake and grow from it, I think even then, blocking the memory might not necessarily change you as a person. With people who have amnesia as a result of brain damage, what a really funny thing with some case studies is that they might lose the memory of events, but they still remember their traits and they still have the same kind of... To explain it actually better, there are three types of memory. And this is the analogy in the book, it's like playing the piano. You've got episodic memory, semantic memory, and procedural memory. So episodic memory would be that you remember going to piano lessons. Semantic memory would be that you're a piano player. And then the procedural memory would be being able to play the piano. And in amnesia, you can lose the episodic memory, but retain the others. And so even if you deleted a memory of something you did, you regretted, but you learned from, you could, in theory, have that wisdom that you had acquired during that experience, but forget the horror of the experience itself. So I'm kind of I'm not sure about that one really.
One thing that we were talking about before and over email was the question, say we do get to the point where this technology existed, do you think you would do it if you had the option?
This is always a really fun one to ask people. Though it's actually quite tricky. At a party, you can't ask people what their darkest memory is. You have to be quite vague.
Your party trick. Your new.
Yeah. What's your most painful moment? Could kill the mood. So yeah, I've thought about my own answers. So I wouldn't delete a memory purely because I don't really have one single traumatic memory. I've got a lot of small embarrassing memories, which I would delete if I could. But given the cost in the novel, I wouldn't spend thousands of pounds deleting the time I accidentally included a colleague in an email slagging her off. And then if I had, the other question is, if you got the message saying you'd had a memory deleted, would you have it reinstated? My answer to that one would be no. Even though it would drive me a little bit mad, I think I would try to trust that my former self knew what she was doing and just let sleeping dogs lie.
This book definitely contained a lot more what if questions than most of the novels that I pick up. And I mean, I think I just started like jogging through like, oh, these are all the things that I might change, and like what would I do in each situation. So it's a marvelous puzzle piece. But before
I'm sorry, I completely cut in. I was wondering, like, what would your answer be? Would you have a memory deleted, and would you get it back if you're offered the chance?
I'd be very tempted. I'd be very tempted to get a memory deleted, but I don't know that I could pick out like 1 week in time. It would be, and also, but yeah, it's hard to know, because I mean, what's so tempting about this is the relief of pain. And I mean, I kept thinking about the Sackler family and like the OxyContin like tragedy that's happening in America and maybe in other countries too, about like everyone who got hooked, they were just seeking to relieve their pain, and like they were in a really desperate place, and they did something that ultimately harmed them. And that's what I found really moving about your book, is all these characters were just trying to live a better life, and they weren't necessarily trying to do something that would affect their families and relationships. They just were in a dark place and wanted to have less pain. So I was really moved by like how tender the relationships were. And like there's a lot I think you don't tend to associate speculative novels with warmth, but I found that there was a lot of tenderness and warmth in your book. But I'm going to, okay, questions. I'm going to try not to hit any of the wrong buttons. So first question is from Samantha Rose, who asks, how did you juggle writing between so many different characters? Are they written in different points of view or tenses, or do we follow an omniscient narrator? And how did that impact how you told their stories?
Oh, that's a good question. Thanks, Samantha. Yeah, so I actually wrote all the sections at the same time. So like I went through Noor's character and did her whole section, then May's, Oscar's, and everyone's. So I just could keep that continuity of voice. I think if I'd skipped between them, it might have made it easier chronologically, but I'd have lost my sense of the characters a bit. So that was something I kind of worked out. And then the rest of it, I mean, there was a lot of chart making. I had lists all over the table, just kind of the chronology was a headache. So yeah, that was a challenge. And with the narrators, I mean, let me just check I'm right. All the voices are third person omniscient, but you're very much present in that person's head. So it's, almost first person. And then, yeah, I think I'm not going to do this again, not for a while. My next books are very much single or double stranded. And it just feels like a lovely holiday, which is nice.
There must have been like pleasure and fun in creating like such a complicated cast and like such complicated storylines too. I mean, you must have thought like, I have to do it this way.
Yeah. And I mean, early on, I actually got feedback saying, can you make it, just because I think multi-person perspectives like polyphonic novels can be a bit challenging, especially when they don't all know each other. These people live separate lives and they intersect. Some of them don't intersect with others, some of them do. So I think that can be a challenging reading experience, because you get to know one person and then you're kind of kicked out and you have to get to know someone else until it comes full circle and you're back with, familiar faces again. So early on, I got feedback from more than a couple of people saying, why don't you make it just one person, like Noor, for example, and have the other characters just as offshoots of her? And even though it was harder work, I stuck to my guns on that one, because I knew, like, a novel that really inspired me early on was A Visit from the Goon Squad, because I just loved the way all the voices came together and something that was more than the sum of its parts rose out of it. And I think I wanted to get that sense of a tapestry of different perspectives across. And also, and I just think it's great for speculative fiction as well. Like it, you want it to feel real. So, showing how it just moves across society, taking in all these different people. I love that effect. So it was rewarding in that sense. While it was hard work, I felt like it was the right decision.
Well, the good thing about being at Scribner's, you can get galleys of the new Jennifer Egan book.
Oh yeah, I made them send me one across the Atlantic. So that was really nice.
No, I lived in Brooklyn many years ago, and I would sometimes see her dropping off her kids. And I mean, I was never going to go bother her, but every time I'd be like, oh, there's Jennifer Egan. She's very tall and very striking.
Oh, nice. So you've had a brush with that. Yeah, it's my dream to run into her and be able to harass her on the street. But fortunately for her, I'm in a different country.
And Kara is saying the candy house is so good. So
yeah, already there is on this chat. And yes, can confirm the candy house is excellent and everyone will love it. It's such a good continuation of Goon School.
We have one more reader question, but if anyone would like to drop more questions into the Ask a Question box, we do have more time. So one more question from Elizabeth Lyons Pence. What speculative fiction novels have inspired you in the past few years?
Ooh, so yeah, I mean, specific to the development of this one, I would say I am actually going to put Goon Squad in there as speculative because there is a speculative, it moves into the future. Obviously not so much as Candy House does. So yeah, that one was huge. There's a book called Strange Bodies by Marcel Theroux, which was just so inspiring to me. It's speculative, but it's pacey, but also philosophical, and it's just the perfect example of like really intelligent, really gripping speculative fiction. I would recommend that to everybody. What else? Obviously, Never Let Me Go was a huge, huge influence. I actually made some notes here because I tend to forget things when I'm asked. And I mean, in terms of things I've read that sort of, they weren't something that inspired the development of the book, but they're things I've read since that I think are just amazing. I'm obviously going to say School for Good Mothers, not just because
you're kind. Thank you.
And then Meredith Westgate, who's also at not Scribner, Simon & Schuster, her book, The Shimmering State, is also really great. That's sort of about memory but kind of approaching it from another angle to me. And I just love reading that. So yeah, those are up there as well.
I don't know if this counts as speculative fiction, but I'm really interested in reading the new Yoko Tawada novel. I think it's about like the world where like entire nations have dissolved, and I'm gonna get to it one day soon. I think we have one more question. Okay. Amy asks.
I thought of Margaret Atwood. I'd like to just throw her in. I forgot her, and she is a huge inspiration. So yeah, I need to say that.
Two votes from us for Margaret Atwood. Amy asks, love this all so much. What about somatic experiencing? Would people who've been through trauma still experience the memory in their body?
Oh, this is super interesting. I'm partway through The Body Keeps the Score at the moment, which is so fascinating. And I wish I'd read it in the run up to writing this book. So it actually might have changed some of the things I wrote. I think, I didn't actually get into that. And there might be another book in this. So thanks for that. I'm having that one. The novel doesn't really touch on bodily reactions. But yes, I think there's a lot to kind of explore there. And it needs more mainstream recognition, actually. I think sort of the medical establishment doesn't really look at how trauma is like a holistic experience, like across brain and body. And I think, there's more for fiction and reality, real life to get into with that one.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I haven't read The Body Keeps the Score either, but would you recommend?
Really would, yeah. It's dense. It's actually like it's more academic than I was, but I like that. So, and it's thorough. It gets into everything, and you do kind of come away with a sense of injustice as well about just how people who are suffering from trauma are basically diagnosed. They're given a sort of label from the DSM, and then some medication, appropriate to that label. And actually nobody is addressing the fact that these people have all basically been traumatized in their early life. And maybe these are the effects of that, instead of like some chemical imbalance in their brain that needs to be fixed. So yeah, and is it Bessel van der Kolk? Sorry, my laptop is actually propped on top of it. He's just so passionate about getting recognition for that. But the way the system is stacked against him does make you kind of, quite angry at times reading it. It's an important book, I think.
So jumping from trauma, I'm going to link this to a question about capitalism, because one thing I found really interesting about your book is that it actually deals with the intersection of ethics, trauma, and capitalism, and like how those things like can create so many problems. So I think it was really fascinating that the idea of playing God, and then all the human error and greed that can muddy up these good intentions. Did you set out, I don't know if this is just a simple yes, no question, but did you know early on in the project that you were gonna like tackle capitalism in that way, or did it just emerge?
I think it wasn't one of my main motives for writing, but as part of that sort of thorough world building that I was talking about earlier, and wanting this to be our world, but with one change, I was thinking, what does this technology, or what does this like advance in research look like? And the answer is it gets monetized, because this is our society and this is what we would do with it. And then in that, with the capitalism, you've got like the clinic, there's a 2-tier system. There are rich people who could afford to get the procedure multiple times because it's thousands of pounds. They could wipe something really trivial if they wanted to, like an email that they sent where they were rude about their colleague. And then there are people who don't have the money, who have to go through the NHS and prove that they're suffering severely enough to get treatment. So, which I think again is, this is how it would work in our world. So I wasn't really setting out to make points as such, just be accurate, like reflect realistically, like this is where we're at as people and this is what this would look like. And again, without saying too many spoilers, there's sort of, when there's money to be made from something, there are people that will cheat or skim off the system. And that's something that happens in the novel as well.
Yeah, when your book really made me think about how it's impossible to escape capitalism and to escape the ethical quandaries that come with money and power. There is another question that has popped up. Esperanza asks, let's see. Okay, hello, I'm from Mexico and the book is not out yet. Are you going to do another event like this soon? And she says thank you, and she looks forward to reading your book. So it's more of a comment rather than a question. I'm gonna jump in and ask about favorite things, because one question that I've been asked where it's been fun to just be able to talk about like stuff I like. So I'm going to ask you to talk about stuff you like. Who are your favorites in terms of like authors and books? Like what are you currently reading and watching and listening to?
Oh, I like this question, though. I never remember everything that I love, and then I walk away like, oh, I never said, like with the Margaret Atwood thing. It's super annoying. So in addition to the authors I was talking about earlier, I would like to mention Elizabeth Strout. She was actually a big influence, not because of any kind of speculative side of things, though I think she should do that. I would be very much here for Speculative by Elizabeth Strout. But the way she treats people and character, their relationships, I think it's so rare and so well done that there's no judgment, there's no kind of conclusiveness. It's super observational and great and ambiguous. Like there, it's not here's the good characters, these are the bad characters, and she does it so lightly that you don't kind of realize until the end that you can't pin any of these, you can't make any definite statement about any of these people, much as you can't in real life. And I love that. So I kind of wanted to take that spirit into this book. So yeah, she's a huge love and ongoing influence. Then other people I like who are completely off the sort of speculative thing. I love Hilary Mantel. She's brilliant. Who else? Like Bernardine Evaristo, I've been reading, like catching up with some of her back catalogue. I'm starting that now, which I'm looking forward to. Looking at the pile under my computer. Someone called Keith Ridgway, who actually, I'm not sure if they're out in the US. I don't know if you know this. They're he's really good, very experimental, which is like the way he structures things is so inspiring. So yeah, I'm kind of reading that as sort of motivation to be a bit more daring with my next book. So yeah, those are some gems that I urge you all to seek out. Then on television, I'm actually about to start Severance, which I
did too. We need to compare notes.
Yeah, I'm leaving it to build up a few episodes because I think it's released. I don't know if it's the same in America. It's released weekly here, so I get very impatient. So I need to let some build up so I can watch a chunk at a time rather than have to drip fed them. And then yeah, other TV I love is I like Maniac, The Leftovers, obviously Black Mirror. These kind of none of which are real world, but they're just, again, it's about the people, which I love.
Oh, I was really obsessed with Yellow Jackets recently. I don't know if it's been released in the UK, but I was about like 6 weeks late to everyone's obsession with it, and then I had no one to talk to because everyone had moved on. Like they had watched it when it properly came out, and then I was trying to work answers about Yellow Jackets into all the
and questions.
Yes, that's belief. It's not about moms in any way, but I would just, apropos of nothing, just bring up Yellow Jackets a lot.
Oh no, I'm glad you did. I couldn't finish Yellow Jackets, not because it was bad, but it started to get like there were no spoilers in this. It gets scarier and scarier, and I'm not great with horror. I don't mind gore. The scenes early on of death and murder didn't really bother me, but it's the spooky side of things. So I knew that if I was going to be able to sleep without the duvet over my head, that I had to bail, which I have now done. But I looked up the rest of the plot online because I couldn't deal with not knowing how it ended. So yeah, it was great, and I was really into it, but it was just too scary.
Yeah, it was. I don't want to use up too much of your extra time talking about it, but 90s nostalgia was fascinating. I know some of the people watching might be aspiring writers. Do you have any nuggets of wisdom to share?
Yeah, I do actually. So one thing that I really loved after like a long period of working on the book by myself and not having much confidence and not knowing whether it was good or not, it actually was really nice. I kind of overcame my fear of having other people read it and opened it up to sort of a circle of trusted people. So I mean, I would recommend to readers, like if you know any industry people who are decent enough to offer you an objective opinion, like avail yourself of that, show it to them. I didn't actually have anyone like that, but so in the absence of industry people, I think get the most like brutal, unpleasant, honest people to just absolutely take your book apart, which is that's what I did. And there's a lot of advice that's like, don't ask your mom, don't ask your friends, they won't give you an honest opinion. Actually, I found that like my nearest and dearest were probably the meanest people. These are not sweet people, they didn't hold back. So yeah, I think, and that was really useful because there were some things that, having that consensus, nearly everyone might say the same thing, and then you have to fix that. And then sometimes there'll be like an outlier who just has their own take on it that you can safely ignore. But it's, just having a wide variety of people look at it was super, super helpful. So I'd recommend that to everybody who is starting.
You're braver than I am. I don't think my nearest and dearest read the book until it was done. And I don't think my parents read it until it was in galley form. So I just delayed it to the last possible moment. We only have a couple minutes left. In case anyone else wants to jump in with one last question, we do have 5 minutes left. But I know that it's okay to ask you about what you're working on next, because you are working on your new novel. So if there's something that you could share with us, I'm sure everyone would be very interested to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm in a weird position where I'm working on two things sort of side by side. So there's another speculative fiction novel that is single person, and then a historical, of all things, set in the 1400s in England. So yeah, they're both. I don't have two laptops open, and I'm not going between them. I'll let one lie fallow for a bit and work on the other. So they're taking turns. But yeah, I'm really enjoying that. I signed myself up again with the historical for a load of research. But yeah, I think I just like to punish myself, and I need to accept that about myself.
That is amazing. If you happen to have extra ideas, feel free to send them my way, because I'm definitely still in the, oh my God, how will I ever write again camp. So this is very inspiring to hear.
Just make a bold statement. Maybe your unconscious will step in.
I would love that. I need my unconscious to work more like yours. But in the couple minutes we have left, what do you hope readers will take away from this book?
I'd like, I don't want to say nothing, but in a sense, I don't really want to provide any answers with the book. It's called Tell Me an Ending, but I don't make judgment. As I was saying about Elizabeth Strout, I love this kind of exploratory rather than conclusive spirit to writing. So I kind of want to raise questions and have people think about these things and their sense of memory themselves. Just wonder rather than have things presented to them as this is good, this is bad. I don't want to provide any answers. I would like to leave things open-ended and be asking questions. And I hope the book achieves that in a not leaving people with a lingering sense of dissatisfaction, but with a sense of freedom that not everything has been decided and a lot of things are possible.
I think that's a really bold stance, because I think there is a desire on the part of readers to have every loop closed by the end, and so it's kind of transgressive to leave some stuff mysterious.
I think there are narrative conclusions, so there's sort of structural satisfaction, I think, but in terms of the rights and wrongs and hows and whys of it, I think that's murkier, and I'm glad that that's left grey.
Do you think, because it's such a rich subject, do you think you would ever return to this subject and these questions later on?
I think, yeah. I mean, now, thinking about the body trauma, it's like it's a rich area. I have had sort of germs of ideas, but yeah, I need to finish the 2 books I've got on the go at the moment before I give in to them. But yeah, I do have ideas of nibbling away. It's something I could return to in future.
That is really exciting. I'm really curious to hear how the historical fiction will go. For whatever reason, my brain just freezes up at the idea of research. So if trade secrets you want to share later, just let me know.
Okay.
I think that's it from us, unless someone wants to drop in with one last question. But thank you so much to Book Soup for hosting us, and to Joe for beaming in from England.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Jasmine, for just a thoughtful, lovely interview. That was great.
Thank you so much to everyone. That's a wrap on our presentation. Thank you again to our guests and to everyone who tuned in this afternoon. We greatly appreciate your time and your support of independent bookstores. Support our bookstore and our authors, and purchase a copy of tonight's featured book. Just click on the green purchase button at the bottom that reads Tell Me an Ending. Buy one for yourself, buy one for a friend, buy 10 if you need. Books make great presents. Even though we're nowhere near the holidays, still tell someone that you love them and give them a great book like this. So if you'd like regular updates on our upcoming events, make sure to follow us on Crowdcast and subscribe to our newsletter. Have a great evening and stay safe, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.